I want to tell you a story about a young guy called Samson Adler. Samson was an average university student, navigating life with the usual blend of ambition and uncertainty. He wasn't standout in his classes, but he managed to maintain decent grades and was on track to graduate. His life was a mix of routine and spontaneity, neither meticulously organized nor completely haphazard. Like many of his peers, Samson enjoyed the typical university experiences. He attended parties where he drank and socialized, sometimes ending the night with a casual hookup. These experiences were fun in the moment, but often left him feeling empty the next day. Samson's leisure time was spent in ways that felt normal for someone his age. He would lose hours playing video games, sometimes alone, other times with friends. These gaming sessions were a way to escape, a temporary reprieve from the demands of his daily life. He was also a regular consumer of pornography, a habit that had become part of his routine, though it offered little more than momentary satisfaction. Social media was another significant aspect of his life. Samson would scroll through the feeds filled with images and stories of others' seemingly exciting lives, which often made his own life feel uninteresting in comparison. He spent evenings binge-watching Netflix series, which provided a way to pass time but rarely left him feeling fulfilled. Despite living a life that seemed normal and balanced, Samson couldn't shake off the feeling that something was missing. He had moments of self-reflection where he wondered why his life felt so unfulfilling. Was it normal to feel this way? Was everyone else just better at hiding their dissatisfaction? Or was he missing some vital piece of the puzzle? These feelings of meaninglessness were subtle, yet pervasive. Samson often found himself questioning the point of his daily routines. He was doing everything that seemed typical for someone his age, yet he felt disconnected from a sense of purpose or deeper happiness. It was as if he was on a treadmill, constantly moving, but not really getting anywhere. This nagging sense of unfulfillment lingered in the background, a constant reminder that perhaps there was more to life than just following the expected path. Now, I don't know if you relate to this story much, but I can tell you that if you do, you're not alone. There was a few surveys done, one with 1,648 participants that were asked to rate the claim, "My life has a real purpose." And 10% of the participants disagreed or strongly disagreed with that. So that's 1 out of every 10 people that felt like their life didn't really have a strong purpose. In another study, there was 137,000 people that answered the question, do you feel that your life has an important purpose or meaning? And this was answered positively by 91% of them, which seems great. That's a lot of people that feel like they have purpose and meaning. But there's 9% of people that are still close to the other 10% that disagree. And that's not a small amount. That's 10 out of every 100 people. So if you're feeling like this, you're not alone. When I was younger, this was exactly how it was for me. I found it so hard to find satisfaction in the actual worthwhile things in life. And a lot of the time, the only way I could actually feel comfortable was through like pure escapism, through partying, drugs, alcohol, sex, pornography, whatever it was. And at the time, I couldn't see how detrimental these things were to me and how they were wearing out the pleasure centers in my brain. So I couldn't find satisfaction and pleasure in the worthwhile things in life. I feel like I was on this kind of hopeless spiral of continually trying to find meaning in escaping from my reality rather than being comfortable for what it actually was. Now, I don't know if you can relate to this, but this is just my experience. Other symptoms or what you might feel from having this feeling of lack of meaningless, or what Viktor Frankl, who I'm going to talk about his book in a minute, called the existential void, is this feeling of like being apathetic or indifferent about life, lacking motivation, or just feeling like, what's the use, or why bother? Like boredom, lack of initiative, lack of interest in the world, and lack of initiative in changing something in the world for better. So more kind of interesting and also extreme examples of what the symptoms of this can be like an interest that borders on obsession in asking deep questions about life, death, the universe, and the purpose of everything. Feelings of disconnection, separation, isolation, or loneliness, an intolerance for the status quo of society, and feelings of being numb or empty, low energy levels, or thoughts of suicide. Now, I'm not sure if you can relate to any of this, but if you're still watching this video, then there probably is something here that you relate to, and I hope that you'll find something here that you can use and find helpful in your life. Before we go any further, I just want to ask you a question. Imagine with me for a moment if you could wake up every morning with a sense of purpose and meaning for your life, and even find purpose and meaning in the small, seemingly just annoying and actually insignificant things. Not just once in a lifetime events, but those small things you do every day to find meaning. If you could find meaning in those things, what would that be like? I'm going to take you back to our story. One day, Samson, when he was at university, was given a book by one of his teachers. And the book that he was given was called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl was a psychologist who was a Jew during the Second World War. And Viktor Frankl went through the concentration camps. He went to Auschwitz and lots of other concentration camps, and he survived. And he wrote this book, Man's Search for Meaning. I have it here. About his experiences in the concentration camps and how he and other inmates found meaning in their experience there, and how we can all find meaning in our lives. When Samson started to read this book, it started to really put things in perspective for him. Not so much that he was really lucky or fortunate to have the life that he lived, and what a terrible time that they had in that era, which is true, but more in the sense that he was looking for meaning in all the wrong places. He'd picked up this idea that he'd find meaning and purpose in his life through the pursuit of pleasure in his life, like doing things that were going to make him feel comfortable and make him feel pleasure was going to bring his life meaning. He learned how the people in these concentration camps were stripped bare down to their bare nakedness. Their families were taken from them and a lot of the time killed. All their possessions were taken. Their clothes were taken from them. All of their hair was shaved from their body. They were left with nothing but their naked selves, their pure naked selves. These people didn't have anything, but yet they could still find meaning in their lives. So Samson started to look at the world differently, and he started to have a greater appreciation for the world and his part to play in it. Samson started, instead of just pursuing the pleasurable activities that he was doing before, started to work on himself and improve himself and expand his philosophy and worldview some more. And one day he opened a book and read this story called The Three Stonemasons. And it went like this. There was 3 stonemasons working hard on this ancient construction site, and a traveller was walking by. And as he walked past the first stonemason, he beckoned him and said, "What are you doing? What are you working on?" And the first stonemason turned around, frustrated, sweaty, angry, and said, "Can't you see what I'm doing? I'm carving these blocks day in and day out. This is what I do. I carve one block at a time and build this wall one block at a time. It's monotonous and tedious." And the traveller thought, fair enough, and carried on walking. And he walked past the second stonemason and beckoned him and said, "What are you doing? What are you working on?" The second stonemason turned round, looking less flustered, less hot, and he said, "I'm carving these blocks, I'm building this wall, but really I'm here to make a living for my family. I'm providing for my family." And fair enough, thought the traveller, and carried on walking. And as he walked past the third stonemason, he beckoned him and said, "What are you doing? What are you working on?" And the third stonemason turned round with a smile, with a grin on his face, with joy in his eyes, and he said, "I'm building a cathedral for the glory of God. And yes, I'm building one block at a time." But he had a vision. He had a greater outlook for his life. And when Samson heard this story, he thought maybe that's what he's been missing. He'd been missing this greater outlook for his life. He'd just been living in the day-to-day monotony of life, rather than thinking about how incredible this life is, how we can do things for the betterment of it all for everyone. So back to Viktor Frankl and the book, Man's Search for Meaning. This book has sold 9 million copies. It's touched the hearts of millions of people around the world. Viktor Frankl says that there are 3 main ways to find more meaning in your life. And he classes them as 3 value kind of sets. And the first one is creative values. To express yourself in a creative way, through creative expression, through valuing what it is to make and do things in a unique way and bring forth your offering, your unique talents to the world. The second is experiential values. So you can find meaning in the experiences that you have every day. And this can be hard to do if you're on social media all the time, you're watching pornography, you're doing drugs and drinking, you're smoking, you're on this kind of dopamine pleasure trip where you're just constantly looking for the next thing that's going to give you the most pleasure, whether it's unhealthy food or whatever it is. And what that does to you is wears out your pleasure centers in your brain. So your dopamine production in your brain basically is just worn out, and you find it hard to get satisfaction and pleasure from less stimulating things. But once you start to retrain your brain and dopamine detox, what people say, then you're going to be able to find so much greater satisfaction and pleasure in just the more simple experiences of life, like a sunset or a sunrise. And you can literally feel when you see a sunset, the emotion rising up within you at the pure beauty of the world that we live in. And Viktor Frankl talks about that, about how in these camps they had nothing. They were being worked to death, literally, and they could find meaning and maybe a glimmer of joy in the beauty of a sunrise or a sunset. The third is attitudinal values, and how your attitude changes the meaning that you will glean from your life and from the world. How you see the world, how you see your life. And that can take us back to that stonemason story. 3 stonemasons were all doing the same things. From the observer, when the traveler was looking at them, they all looked like they were just doing the same thing. But their attitude about what they were doing was completely different, and that changed the meaning that they got from it. And something that really helps with this is just having a different worldview. We are so entitled today to everything that we have in the world. And we're constantly looking for problems, and we're looking for problems in society and what's wrong with everything. But we have so much to be grateful for. There's so much good in the world. The fact that right now you're sat there watching this video, or you're listening to it, doing something, and you're safe, mostly likely you're safe right now, to be honest, is a miracle. We're animals, and we're predators, and we're also prey. And we're very tribal, and historically we wouldn't have always got along with each other very well. The testament that this book, Man's Search for Meaning, gives is one of horror and of what can happen with humanity. And the fact that I'm sat here recording this video, you're sat there or whatever you're doing, watching or listening to this, to be honest, is a bloody miracle. The fact that there's not someone trying to crash into my house or break into my house right now and steal everything that I have is incredible, because that's how it was for a lot of history. So we have a lot to be grateful for. And when you can start viewing the world in this way, You can change your attitude, and you can find meaning in much greater things in this way. Now, I want to add something else, one more thing on here to make it 4. So there's 4 value sets here. And the 4th one is going to be responsibility values. And I'm going to go back to that story. There was 2 stonemasons in that story that were allowing the value of responsibility to give their life meaning. The second stonemason, who was providing for his family a noble effort, was finding meaning and satisfaction through the adoption of responsibility of providing for his family. And the third stonemason, he was responsible for the glorification of God, for building a cathedral. So every day when he got out of bed, he thought, oh, I'm part of this team of people that is building a cathedral to glorify God, something that I believe in deeply, and I'm deeply awe-inspired and grateful for. What kind of meaning do you think having that kind of responsibility for something in the world like that will give you? Imagine you're like a teenager and you've got like a 6-year-old little brother or sister, and you've taken the responsibility to look out for them and look after them. Maybe your parents aren't around, or they're not doing very well, and you've taken the responsibility to look after this little sibling of yours, because they're too young to look after themselves. You've got to watch out for them. You've got to make sure they're safe. You've got to make sure they help them take care of themselves in the best way they can. Teach them to be able to do that and actually take care of them. What kind of meaning do you think that will give your life? It might be hard at times, for sure, but the meaning that we find in the responsibility in our lives is really amazing, and it can keep us going. Now, Viktor Frankl came up with a type of therapy called logotherapy. So it's about logos and having a vision or a greater purpose for one's life. Now, logotherapy, if you apply this, if you look into it some more, can help you in so many different areas. If you apply these things, these 4 values that I've given to you, which is part of logotherapy, things might really start to change for you. There were some case studies of some soldiers that had combat-related PTSD, and logotherapy exercises that highlighted the construct of meaning led to a significant decrease in the symptoms of stress, anxiety, and depression in these people. That's incredible. One study looked specifically at depression and stress among cervical cancer patients. So we're looking at the depression that people have when they've got cancer. That's really like an existential thing. Researchers measured the cortisol levels, which is the stress hormones, and also the Beck Depression Inventory, which is a way of measuring depression, from 2 separate groups of 15 people. One group received logotherapy, where the other one just received standard cancer treatment. After 6 weeks, there was a significant decrease in the score of the BDI, depression, and the level of cortisol, the stress hormones, in the group that had received the treatment. And in the group that had not received the treatment, there was no change. So what that means is improving the level of meaning and purpose that someone has for life reduces the level of stress and depression that they're experiencing. There's more studies as well. There was one where they treated adolescent cancer patients, so really young people that had cancer, and they found measurable decrease in the level of suffering that they had, and just suffering of all kinds, through having this logotherapy, which means that increasing the level of meaning that they had for their life literally decreased the level of suffering that they were experiencing from having cancer and going through treatment. This stuff is just incredible. So I want to give you some action steps that are going to help you increase the meaning in your life and hopefully make you feel happier, more interested, more motivated, so we can start waking up every day with like an excitement and an interest and a curiosity for life, and knowing that we can make a difference. So there's 4 here. The first one is stop overstimulation. So as I mentioned briefly earlier about overstimulating our brain and wearing out our pleasure centers, when you do that, it stops you from being able to find meaning and seeing the purpose in the smaller things in life, which is really where, that's where the great moments in life, I think, come from is when you can really appreciate the small things. The things that are overstimulating our brain and wearing out our pleasure centers are social media. Social media is just like this dopamine trip constantly. If you're just like scrolling on TikTok, your brain is just like hungry and producing all this dopamine. And then when you leave there, like you've worn out your dopamine production centers in your brain. Pornography, it does the exact same thing. It's just this overstimulating, unrealistic thing, and it's completely out of touch reality. And you have a problem with pornography or you're using pornography, when you get into a relationship or if you're in a relationship, that's definitely affecting your relationship. Even if you don't think it is, it definitely is. And if you stopped, there'd be things that would significantly improve in your relationship. And if you get into a relationship, then things are going to be a lot better. The other things are news. The news, like if you're watching the news every day, our brains aren't designed to learn all the information about the whole world every day all at once. Humans evolved in like small tribes where we were designed to deal with like the tribe's issues, and we could do that in a healthy way. But now we have access to social media and the news. We have like access to all the information in the world all at once. And the news is just pretty much all negative, because these news and media companies realize that our brains are literally wired to look for danger. So that's why all of the news like headlines today are basically negative, because they realize that they can get a lot more views, they can get a lot more eyeballs on their content if they're just covering negative shit. But these companies, it's not about like actually informing you with helpful information about the world, which is what everyone's argument is. It's like, well, what am I going to do? Where am I going to get my information from? Where am I going to learn? I need to know what's happening in the world. But these companies aren't trying to give you the most helpful information that you need to know to like function in the world properly. They're just trying to give you the most like clickbait information so that they get you to view their stuff, because they're money-making organizations. They're not charities. They're not doing it to help anyone. They're just doing it literally to make money. So social media, porn, the news. And then the last thing here, like the overstimulation, is like just buying into like political narratives and over drama, like drama situations are just going to overstimulate your brain. So cutting back on all those things that are wearing out our pleasure centers in those ways. The second thing here that's going to help you increase the meaning in your life is having a vision for your life, having something that you aspire to be like, someone you want to become, a life that really gets you looking forward and gets you fired up for the future and gets you working on yourself and want to be disciplined and want to sacrifice those things that you do to pursue pleasure in the moment to actually make the future better. When you have a vision for your life that you actually can fall in love with, this brings so much more passion to your life and much more purpose to your life, which is going to then fill your life with much more meaning. If you've never done anything like this before, just start to dream, start to think about what the life you'd actually like an authentic vision of your future would be like. Not just like what society tells you should have, like a nice house, a nice car, like a beautiful partner, lots of money. Like what is actually going to make you feel satisfaction for life? The third thing here is listening to people that will help you to and expanding your view of the world so you can see more meaning in the world, see more purpose in the world, and seeing more beauty in the world. Like just that thing that I shared with you earlier about how incredible it is that we're not just killing each other, or we haven't got like armies of like men coming into our cities and towns to like take all our money and rape our women and kill all our like first sons and things like that. Like that was such the normal thing throughout all of history. The order and the security that we live in today, like right now in history, is unparalleled, and that's incredible. That is so amazing that we have this life. So changing your worldview and the way you view life and say humanity in general is really going to help you increase the meaning that you have in your life. And one of these ideas is that, you know, that humanity is like a cancer or like a plague on the earth. And I think that idea is robbing a lot of people a lot of meaning in their lives, because it just makes us feel terrible about ourselves. Like we don't want to do anything because everything we do is just a plague. We're just making things worse. We're a cancer. But it's not true. We can make things better. Not everything we do is just making things worse. So we just need to work on ourselves, and we can actually make things better. We can make the world a better place. And the world is already doing great. Like I say, we're not at each other's throats. We're not killing each other nearly as much as we used to. And the fourth thing here is developing a relationship with something transcendent, whether that's like through religion, like traditional religions, or spirituality, or like meditation, just creating this relationship with something greater than yourself. I'm not sure if you've ever like tried to pray before, if you're into prayer, but prayer is really powerful. Meditation is really powerful. Surrender is like this ancient practice that people have done, and it brings such a level of literally, you don't even need to use a word for it, but just this level of peace and satisfaction and gratitude for life that you have when you're in a relationship with something like this is just really, really like expansive and brings so much purpose and meaning to your life. So I hope you found this video helpful, and I really encourage you to get the book Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. It's a really good book. It will just change your life completely. And yeah, if you have found this video helpful, then comment below, let me know your thoughts. If you have any criticisms or things you don't agree with, yeah, fire away.